Hello, everyone. When I first read about this Tempting Fate Heart when Season 1 launched, I thought it was S tier. I thought this heart was going to be amazing. I thought I was going to put it in all my builds. And then when I read it a little bit closer, I realized that the critical strike damage added is additive, while the non-critical strike damage is multiplicative. And then I thought, well, this is completely useless. This is a bait. And more recently, I thought, well, is it really, or is it actually good in some cases? So to figure that out, we needed to work out the math. And that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to work out the math for you, and then we're going to talk about when is this good and when is this not good? Or is this just trash, or is it treasure? So let's find out. So to figure this out, we need to do a sample calculation to find out how much damage do we get when we use the heart versus not using the heart. Okay, so let's say, for example, you do 100 base damage and you have a total of 200% crit damage on your gear or skills, things like that, and you have 70% crit chance. And let's say for this example, we're going to be using the best possible values on this heart here, which is 75% additive crit damage and minus 30% multiplicative crit damage. So what we'll do is we'll first figure out how much damage do we do when we do crit. That would be 100 damage base damage plus the 100 damage base times our total crit percent. Our total crit percent would be 200% crit damage plus 75% crit damage. This would be equal to 100 plus 275, which is equal to 375 total damage when we crit. Now, how about non-crit damage? Well, we lose 30% of the damage, so that would be our 100 damage that we normally do minus 30% of the 100 damage, which would be 100 minus 30, which is 70 damage. Well, now we need to know is how much damage do we do on average? So to figure that out, we'd use our weighted average damage formula here, which is equal to the damage that we do when we crit times our crit percent plus the damage that we do when we don't crit times our non-crit percent, which would be equal to the following. So how much damage do we do when we crit? Well, that would be 375 damage times our crit percent, because we do it 70% of the time, plus the damage that we do when we don't crit, which is 70, as we saw here, times how often we don't crit, which is 30%. This is equal to this plus this, which gives us 283.5 average damage with our heart. Now, what if we don't have the heart equipped? How much damage would we do? Would it be better? Would it be worse? Let's find out. So to figure that out, we use, again, the same weighted average formula, which would be equal to the damage that we do when we do crit, which would be our base 100 damage plus our 100 damage times our 200% crit damage. And then we multiply that by our crit percent of 70% plus our 100 damage that we do when we don't crit times how often do we not crit? Well, 30% of the time, which is equal to 210 plus 30, which is 240. Well, we can see that we definitely do a little bit more damage with the heart, but how much more damage do we do percentage-wise? So to figure out our percent change, this would be equal to how much did our damage change divided by what was our original damage without the heart. Well, that would be equal to the damage that we do with the heart minus the damage we do without the heart divided by 240. So our change in damage is we gained 43.5 damage divided by the damage without the heart of 240, which gives us an increase in 18.125%, which is pretty good. That's like having another Edge Masters socketed or aspect into your gear. So that's pretty nice. Okay, well, now you might say, well, that was with a very specific example, right? That was with 200% crit damage, with 70% crit chance, and the heart values that you see here, which gave us our 18% damage increase. Now, what if these numbers were different? Well, I made a little Excel calculator here that you can use for yourself if you'd like, and you're considering using this heart to find out exactly how much damage increase that you would get. And let's play with this and see if we notice anything about when does this heart get better or when does it get worse? And are there any trends? So one place to start is with crit percent. So if I increase my crit percent from 70% to 80%, what do you think is going to happen to my average damage increase? Well, let's find out. Did you say increase? Well, if I change it to 80%, we go up to 20.7%. So yes, it did increase. And if I change that to 90, again, it increases to 23. 100 would be best case scenario of getting a 25% damage increase. And that would be pretty huge. That's pretty awesome, right? Now, if we go the other way, then as you might expect, it would get less, 15%. How about at 50%? 11. How about 40? Now we're at 11%. Now what about 30? Oof, now we're at 0.9%. So we're getting really bad here. How about at 20%? Ooh, -6%. And this, of course, makes sense because we're getting that negative percent multiplier more often as we get a less and less crit percent. And this is why this heart is really kind of a bait for early game and even mid game until you really get high crit percent. And it's kind of unfortunate that Blizzard gives you this heart early on because people might throw it in there thinking that it's good when actually you're getting even less damage than you would if you didn't use it at all. So that's kind of interesting. Well, now what about the crit percent damage on your gear? Well, if I'm at 200%, I get 18%, as we saw. Now, what if I increase this? Make a prediction. What do you think is going to happen to my average damage increase? Did you say increase? Let's find out. So if I go to 220%, it actually lowers. How about 240%? Now we're at 16. How about 300? Now we're at 14. How about 400? Now we're at 11. So what's going on there? Well, if you think about it, I'm adding 75% to my 400%, which is a lower percent gain than if I have a lower amount of 200%. It's like I'm adding some amount to my bucket here. And if my bucket's already really, really full, then adding a little bit more to that bucket doesn't help that much percentage-wise. But if my bucket's relatively empty, like if I go down to 100%, well then adding 75% helps out a lot. And we can see that with 25%, or if I had 0% crit damage, well then we get a 43% average damage increase. Okay. Now that being said, if you have high crit percent and you don't have much crit damage, then you're really not helping yourself out. Okay. So that's kind of interesting to think about. Now, what about the heart level? So let's look at that. So here, there are different heart levels. And if you didn't know, the different heart levels give you different amounts of plus and minus percentages. So level 1, the best case scenario is 65% plus with the 25% minus multiplier. Level 2, 70 and 30, 75, 35. Level 4, 80, 40. Level 5, 85, and 45. Okay. And we can see how does my average damage change as we change the heart level. So for example, if I have 280% crit damage and 70% crit chance, we can see as my level goes up, what happens to the average damage increase? Well, it goes up as well. So if you have really high crit percent, then you'll want to get a higher level gem. Now, what if your crit percent is 50%? Well, now we can see, well, what happens to our average damage increase? Well, it doesn't change. Okay, so that's kind of interesting, is that it actually doesn't matter what level your gem is at if you're around 50%. Now, what if you're lower than 50%? Well, here we're at 30%, And we can actually see that if you're below 50%, then as the heart level increases, it actually gets worse. So if you're below 50%, ideally you actually want a lower level gem. Now, probably if you're lower than 50% though, you're probably not getting much gains anyways, and it's probably not very useful. So is this trash or treasure? Well, if you're above 50% crit chance, you can get some pretty significant gains in your average damage, and that's pretty dang good. If you are below 50% or at 50%, you're probably not going to get a whole lot of gains, and it's probably better to use something else. That being said, I'd recommend use the calculator in the description and play around with it yourself. You can put in your own crit damage percent, your crit chance, and all that, and see exactly how much damage increase you're going to get to figure out, is this worth it for you, or is it better to use something else?